Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction, in the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else.
Here we are, the Anarchist World This Week. It's cold, it's miserable, it's raining. But in your part of the world, the sun is shining because I'm talking to you. You like that? Megalomania. But you got to start after the budget, after listening to the budget last night and now providing the Anarchist Media Institute response. You got to start off with a bit of humour. There is not. You got to start off with humour. Look, before we start off on our budget response, well, everybody else has got a budget response. Why shouldn't the Anarchist Media Institute have a budget response? My name's Joseph Toscano, and if you wonder what anarchy is all about, an anarchist society is a voluntary, non-hierarchical society based on the creation of political and social structures based on equal decision-making power. That's direct democracy. It's a society where wealth is held in common and used for the common good. Conservative concepts, using the Commonwealth for the common good. The people involved in the decision, making that decision, extraordinarily dull stuff. So if you want some drug, sex and rock and roll, tune out. If you want some interesting analysis, keep listening. Now, first of all, if you are in the city of Melbourne, that's right, the city of Melbourne, on Friday the 15th of May, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Victorian Trades Hall at 54 Victoria Street, Carlton, the Melbourne Trade Hall, that's right, will be signing a memorandum of understanding with the West Papuan independence movement. That's right, this is a very important time for the West Papuans in Australia and in West Papua, obviously. A very important time because they are forming an alliance with the trade union movement, and they're inviting everybody to the Trades Hall Bella Union Bar. Now at 5:30 p.m, they will be assembling around the 8-hour monument for a signing ceremony, which is just across the road from Victoria Trades Hall. I'll be singing the West Papuan anthem, and the caretaker of Melbourne Trades Hall, Jacob Grech, will illuminate the Morning Star flag flying from the top of Trades Hall. This is a very important alliance because, as you know, both the Liberal National Coalition and the Labor opposition refuse to acknowledge the West Papuan independence movements. Obviously, they're concerned about the Indonesian reaction to their acknowledgement of that particular movement. So it's an extremely important memorandum of understanding. And this is on the heels that on the 25th of May, the Melanesian Spearhead Group, which includes countries like the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and the list goes on, Bougainville, if they vote for independence the next week or so. The the West Papuan independence movement has actually applied to join the Melanesian Spearhead Group, and There's a little bit of toing and throwing, especially from the Papua New Guinea and Fijian delegates. But if they are incorporated into the Melanesian Spearhead Group, that gives them the platform they need, the United Nations platform they need, in order to keep pushing the case for West Papuan independence, both on a national and international stage. So there's a very important deal between the Federal Republic of West Papua and Australian trade unions. And the sign-in ceremony, as I said before, will be at 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Friday the 15th of May, Victorian Trades Hall, 54 Victoria Street, Carlton, Melbourne. And if you want further information, I suggest you just go to the West Papuan office website. Just Google West Papuan Independent Department of Federal Republic.org, federalrepublic.org, dfait.federalrepublicofwestpapua.org. So it's dfait.federalrepublicofwestpapua.org. Don't forget, Wednesday the 3rd of June is Mabo Day. Now's the time to start organising events in your part of the world. I mean, Mabo Day is an important event in our calendar, and we'll be talking more about that in the next week or so. So keep those dates in mind. And those of you who are interested in the English, or I should say the United Kingdom, it is the United Kingdom, isn't it? Who knows for how long? Elections and the re-election of the Cameron government. And kept your eye on that particular election. It was interesting how the Murdoch media pulled out all stops to ensure their Conservative friends were re-elected. And obviously this is a template for what will be happening in Australia, whether the election occurs in November or late next year, depending on what the opinion polls say about the current budget, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So those of you who are concerned about the fact that the Murdoch media, including Foxtel and News Corporation, don't actually pay tax and actually get tax refunds of hundreds of millions of dollars while making billions of dollars of profit, but are also concerned about the pivotal political role the Murdoch media plays in choosing who shall be the next government, well, then you should actually get on board the Murdoch's Minion bandwagon and resist Murdoch's Minions bandwagon. Now, on the first Friday of every month in the city of Melbourne, we congregate outside the Herald and Weekly Times at 40 City Road in Melbourne, 40 City Road, South Bank in Melbourne. And last time we actually met at Federation Square and then marched to the Herald and Weekly Times building, and we've made a decision that from now on, and the next one will be on Friday the 5th of June, we'll be meeting at Federation Square at 11:30am and then marching to the Herald and Weekly Times building at about 11:45. Now, it's very important that Australians follow our example across the country. There are Murdoch offices around the country. This is not just a matter of a corporation that doesn't pay tax and froths at the mouth every time, somebody's involved in some type of political activity. This is a corporation which determines governments. And I think it's important that people show their displeasure at the pivotal role this organisation plays in our society. So we encourage you to organise events outside Murdoch media premises around the country, whether it's a small country town, a large regional town or a capital city. Now's the time to organise, because if you don't organise now, you're going to see what happened in England. You're going to see the re-election of Abbott-led government, courtesy of the Murdoch media, which will pull all stops in order to ensure the re-election of their neo-conservative mates. All right, I know you're all excited. Let's move on to the budget response. Now, budgets are basically housekeeping, We all budget, or we try to budget. Some of us are more successful than others. I mean, you've got income and you've got outgoings. It's very simple. You've got income, you've got outgoings. You've got revenue, you've got outgoings. And as Mr. Dickens used to say, Charles Dickens, if you spend 1 cent more than you make, you got a problem. So this is an interesting budget. And it's an interesting budget for a number of reasons. Because what we've seen, to a significant degree, is a 180-degree turn in this government's agenda. Public turn, not a private turn, but a public turn. This is a budget, I call this the budget before the shit hits the fan budget. This is what it's about. Because everybody knows, every single commentator, everybody with one synapsing neuron knows that this country, and that means the people in this country, especially those 80% of people on social security benefits and who are wage earners, and to a significant degree small business, and we'll talk about them in a minute, face a bleak future. And they face a bleak future in the next 2 years for a very important reason. We'll see over 250,000 people thrown onto the unemployment heap as manufacturing continues to close down, as the car manufacturing industry closes down, and as other manufacturers find it impossible to continue to make a profit in this country. And as far as the iron ore led, the mining recovery is concerned, that's on a downward spiral, and that downward spiral will continue. And it's quite likely that Australian iron ore prices will drop to $25 from the current $50, within the next 12 months. And that will occur for two important reasons. One, as China changes from a export-driven economy to a service-driven economy, there'll be less need to import iron ore and coal. But more importantly, as the rest of the world moves towards renewable energy sources, whether it's water, wind or solar, there will be less demand for Australia's primary mining exports, coal, gas and iron ore. So that means less revenue, less money coming in. So what this government is trying to do, and the key word is trying, it will or won't succeed, depending on you. That's right, listeners to this program and other Australians who have that one synapsing neuron in their head, chugging away, understanding what's going on. Let's go back to the last federal election, September 2013, I think it was. That's right, September 2013. 13th of September it could have been, or the 12th or the 9th, I can't remember exactly. When Mr Abbott, the man who said, and let's not forget this because we tend to forget these things, the man who said he would give up his last breath to ensure that some of the richest mining corporations, or the richest corporations on this planet, did not pay 1 extra cent in tax. When he was elected Prime Minister and he spoke to the people of Australia, his opening words were, "This country, we're open for business." He didn't say, "Thank you for electing me and my party's government." He didn't say, "I will attempt to rule for all Australians." What he said was, "This government is open for business." And in their first budget in May 1914, they acted as if they had a majority in both houses of Parliament. And they attempted to impose a draconian budget which put the emphasis on savings on those who are least able to afford it. We all know, I'm not going to go through the litany of budget horrors in 2014. And it was only through the actions of listeners to this program and the actions of other Australians who saw how unfair that budget was, putting the burden of attempting to achieve a surplus on wage earners and those 40% of Australians on social security benefits, that this government began to realise that it was unelectable if it attempted to introduce its neoliberal agenda, its corporatisation, privatisation, deregulation, privatisation agenda. And then for the next year, it attempted to get its policies through by regulation, by actually bypassing Parliament. So this is a government which lied from the very moment it was elected, which broke most of its major promises within 4 weeks of being elected. So now we have a situation where you and I and every other Australian have been asked to trust them that they will keep their word, to trust them that they have changed their ideological agenda. So hence the 2015 budget. An extraordinary piece of work which I understand has been receiving a lot of praise. A lot of praise. So let's look at it. Let's look at this marvellous budget. Well, if you live in Victoria, you'd think that Victoria didn't exist. Obviously, this is a New South Wales-centric budget, which apart from some special infrastructure spending for northern Queensland, really has not put the interests of Australians first. Let's look at the diamond in the 2015 hockey budget crown, their small business package. And then let's look at the reason they've introduced this small business package. Now, Treasurer Mr. Joe Hockey's small business budget package isn't the economic godsend the government and many commentators believe it is, or make it out to be. We're told, for the first time in living history, somebody is listening to small business. Cutting taxes by 1.5% for companies earning less than $2 million and actually cutting taxes by 5% for unincorporated traders and businesses, and allowing small businesses and sole traders to access a $20,000 tax deduction for business-related asset purchases won't make much difference for the small business sector and sole traders, let alone the rest of Australia. This is a classic dead cat bounce. You drop the dead cat from the first floor, you watch it fall on the ground, it bounces, and then it stops bouncing. Very simple. Now, before we actually look at why, I think it's important to remember that the two main reasons why small businesses and sole traders, and we're talking over 1 million small businesses employing over 5 million people, can't flourish in this country are directly related to the market share a small number of corporations exercise over most aspects of the Australian economy, and taxation laws that allow these same corporations to legally pay voluntary taxation. So what does this mean in plain English? Look around you. Look around you. Have a look at how multinational corporations, both based in Australia and overseas, now dominate the small business sector. Have a look at the service station industry. How many small businesses still exist in the service station industry? Have a look at the pet industry. How many small pet shops are struggling to survive as corporations take over the pet industry? Corporations like Pet Barn. Have a look at the hardware industry. How many small hardware shops continue to exist in this country as we see the bananisation and the masterisation of the hardware business? Look at the corner shop and look at the way that 7-Eleven now monopolises the corner shop industry. Look at the clothing industry and look at how major corporate brands are gaining traction in this country. Look at the fast food industry and have a look at how the Domino's and Gloria Jeans and McDonald's of the world are getting a bigger and bigger market share. And the list goes on and on. Look at the healthcare industry, primary healthcare, privately owned general practices. Almost 50% of general practices are now owned by 5 corporations. So what we've seen over the last 20 years is the corporatisation of business activities which traditionally have been the sole preserve of small businesses. So one of the main reasons small businesses don't flourish or open and close with religious regularity, open and close, is because it is very difficult for a small business to compete with a large corporation, especially when large corporations are willing to make a loss in one area to close down a small business in that area and then dominate that marketplace. Look at the food industry, selling packaged food. Woolworths and Coles, over 85% of the market. And when you add IGA and the other 2 or 3 Aldi, you're looking at about 95% of the market is now dominated by 4 players. And the list goes on and on. So what we should be looking at, if this government was really interested in the future of small business and sole traders, it wouldn't give a handout now, which will be finished in a few months' time, to give it a bit of electoral advantage over the next 2 to 3 months, so it can make up its mind whether it'll call an election or not. But what it would be doing, it would be introducing antitrust laws to ensure that no 2 or 3 corporations dominate economic activity in a particular sector of Australian society. In the United States, the home of capitalism, there are antitrust laws which prevent corporations owning more than 25% of economic activity in a particular sector. In Europe, across Europe, legislation has been passed which protects small business from the unconscionable conduct of large corporations, which regulate corporations heavily to ensure that small businesses continue to survive. This is not about a quick sugar fix. This is about ensuring that this sector continues to survive. Now, most small businesses and sole traders pay their income tax unless they're involved in the black economy and solely use cash, which is almost impossible in today's marketplace. So most small businesses that are incorporated are paying 30% company tax, and reducing company tax from 30% to 28.5% really does not make much difference. We're talking about businesses which have profits of less than $2 million. I mean, 10% of $2 million is $200,000. 1.5% would be about a $30,000 saving. If that. That's if you make a $2 million profit. That's at the top end. If you're making a $100,000 profit, which most small businesses make, and sole traders, if you're making a $100,000 profit, what's that? That's $1,500. And the second important issue if you're a small business is the fact that it's not just about unfair competition and the unconscionable behaviour of large corporations. It's about being able to work on a level playing field. When you have large transnational corporations which pay voluntary taxation, and most of these corporations are paying less than 5% taxation legally on their profits, it's impossible to compete. Not only do they have an excessive market share, they also pay voluntary taxation. How can a business which pays 28.5% taxation on profits compete with a large corporation which is paying less than 5% tax on their profits? I mean, if the coalition government was really interested in helping the small business sector, they will be passing legislation to introduce a turnover tax. That's right, a turnover tax. Let's say any company that has a turnover, or sole trader has a turnover of more than $1 million, which would exclude 95% of small businesses and sole traders. Bingo, turnover tax. You cannot avoid a turnover tax, a little bit like a goods and services tax. I mean, what we've got to look at is different ways of taxing these people so that they pay their fair share of tax. So two things, if they were really interested in small business, they would be doing is they'd be passing antitrust legislation to break the power of corporations that dominate particular spheres of economic activity in our society, and they would be passing legislation to ensure large corporations pay 28.5% company tax. And if they can't do it through legislation because of the international nature of transnational corporations, do it through a turnover tax. You listen to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network. My name's Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting today's program. I'm conducting a budget analysis. Now, before we continue this little discourse, just like to remind you that if you are interested in actually having some impact on what's happening in the world today, instead of just sitting back and tut-tutting and saying somebody should do something about that, or, I'm going to do something about that at some particular point, think about joining Public Interest Before Corporate Interest. Public Interest Before Corporate Interest is a new political social organisation which has been launched a few weeks ago in order to conduct public campaigns, both electorally and in the community and in the workplace, to highlight the importance of putting public interests before corporate interests. We need new members. We'd like to register as a political party in the next 3 or 4 months. We need at least 550 members. If you're on the electoral roll, you're welcome. If you're not on the electoral roll, you're welcome. If you want to get a application form, there's a number of ways you can do it. You can leave a message with contact details on 0439 395 489. 0439 395 489. If you don't use computers, and I don't blame you, you can write to us at Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Or if you're computer literate, you can always download an application form from pibci.net. PIBCI, Public Interest Before Corporate Interest. pibci.net. Just put it in your search engine, pibci.net. Hey presto, download a form, send the information that's up on the website to your friends, send it to your enemies. And if you want to email us, you can email us at info@pibci.net, and I'll mention that later on. And if you're interested in anarchist ideas, look at the website, anarchistmedia.org. Anarchistmedia.org. You can see all the things we've got planned for the rest of the years and all the things that have been happening over the previous 4 to 5 months. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast on the Community Radio Network. This program is streaming live on 3cr.org.au. The program is podcast. You can access the podcast by going to 3cr.org.au. So if you are, at a loss, bored, listless, have a look at the website, have a look at what we're involved in. All right, let's get back to the budget. I know your eyes are clouding over, but it's very important to actually be able to puncture a hole in this balloon, because this is a balloon which has been sent upwards by the coalition government, which knows, as I said before, that next year is going to be a very, 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 very difficult year politically, as unemployment increases, as more and more people find their jobs disappearing. There are two issues in current Australian society which affect everybody: housing, job security. Two issues. Housing affects every man, woman and child in the country. Job security, in its own way, affects a significant number of people. And what we are seeing is a housing crisis and job insecurity, especially in the manufacturing sector, which employs over 1 million people in this country, and in service industries, which are beginning to feel the pressure of less spending. And why is there less spending among Australians? It's very simple. One, although official interest rates set by the Reserve Banks are at 2%, historically low, we haven't seen them since the Second World War, most Australians' debts are based on mortgages, credit cards, and personal loans. Now, these massive banking profits we've seen over the past few decades, since the Commonwealth Bank was privatised in the mid-1980s, have been built on the back of the margins which a cartel of major banks are actually able to extract from their customers. Although Reserve Bank interest rates are at 2%, it's difficult to get a home loan less than 5%. If you're involved in business and you lend for business purposes, interest rates range anywhere between 6 to 12%. And if you're in the unfortunate position which millions of Australians find themselves in, of having credit card debt in order to survive, the major banks are still charging anywhere between 15 to 21.5% interest on money which they borrow at around 3%. So they're making extraordinary profits from the billions of dollars which are owed on credit cards. So we've got a problem. Over the last decade, because of the Liberal National Party's anti-union policies to a significant degree, I should say over the last 2 decades, what we've seen is a slowing in wage growth. Not only jobs insecurity, but a slowing in wages growth. So that what that means in plain English is that the amount of take-home pay, whether you're a sole trader, an incorporated small business, a wage earner, whether you're in part-time work or full-time work, has, one, not kept pace with inflation, but more importantly, it has not kept pace with increasing housing costs. And in an era when there is no increase in public housing and increases in homelessness, we are finding that more and more and more disposable income, families' disposable income, especially people on earning less than, say, $1,500 a week, which is the majority of Australians, most of their income, 30, 40, 50%, goes towards servicing a mortgage or paying the rent. So that leaves less money to buy things. And that's the nub of the small business package. And that's the nub of the parental leave scheme and the childcare scheme, which has been introduced in this budget. It's all about forcing people back into the workforce. Because although there are historically low interest rates, people are not willing to borrow from the banks to expand their businesses. Not willing because of the high interest rates. Yes, high interest rates when the Reserve Bank charges 2%. So the government knows it's got a dilemma. But as this government is not interested in taxing their corporate mates or introducing new taxes like a turnover tax on major corporations, or actually ensuring that corporations pay their fair share of tax, or introducing things like a stock market turnover tax to make sure that people who don't pay tax by introduction of new taxes. This government's no new taxes mantra means that its revenue base is constrained. And because wages are not increasing, the taxation base has decreased. And because profitable businesses have been privatised by successive federal governments and state governments across the country, we no longer have publicly owned assets which generate an income. And the 2 main pieces of legislation that the coalition government, the Abbott-led government, has pushed through Parliament, the repealing of the mining tax and the repealing of the carbon tax, meant that less revenue was coming in. So, in an attempt to stimulate the economy, the government has done 2 things. One, it has introduced this small business package, decreased taxation by 1.5% for incorporated companies earning less than $2 million and 5% for sole traders or unincorporated companies. And it has given small businesses the ability to spend up to $20,000 on assets for their business, hoping that this money, which has been pumped into the economy, will give them that economic bump which they need in order to call an election in November. This is what it's all about. This is the little balloon that's been floated up. And if opinion polls improve over the next 2 to 3 months, bingo, I can assure you there will be an election in November, because they know that next year it's going to be exceptionally hard for them to be re-elected. So this budget is all about re-electing the coalition government. And secondly, when we look at their childcare policies, it's all aimed at pushing parents back into the economy. I mean, I remember when it was seen as a important job to rear children, and one parent could stay home for the first 3 to 4 or 5 years or whatever to actually give their children the foundation they need to become good human beings and good citizens. But now, anybody who decides to take time off is considered to be some type of criminal. We saw this with the single parents benefit, where when your child reaches 8, you now have to look for a job. And it's the same with now that if you're not in the workforce, if you're not a wage slave, if you're not in part-time or full-time work, you don't get any of these benefits. You're left to rot. And the dilemma is, as we said before, the dilemma is that if you are part of a couple and you both don't work, if you both work, it's exceptionally difficult to meet those high housing costs. I mean, this is the situation we currently find ourselves in because we have believed the neoliberal mantra that if you allow the private sector to dominate the economy, the benefits will trickle down to everybody. That if we privatise assets, prices will fall. I'll give you an example, a recent example, which may not apply to many of our listeners, but it's a good example. Medibank Private was formed by the federal government in 1982. 1982. It was privatised late last year. Now, Medibank Private made a profit every year which went into government coffers. Now, although the government received $5 billion from Medibank Private, what happened to the future of its members? Within a few months of privatisation, fees for Medibank Private increased by over 10%, in some cases 12-13%, which was double the average of other private health insurance companies, and the benefits which were paid to members was stripped. Now, this happens in all aspects of the economy when you privatise government-owned assets. It may help the budget bottom line for 1 year, but it stops you benefiting from that. It's a little bit like having 3 chooks. You can have 3 chooks for 3 or 4 years and get 1, 2, 3 eggs a day for the next 3 to 4 years. You can kill the chooks and eat them that night and do without eggs for the next 3 to 4 years. Same concept when you privatise public assets. But more importantly, as I've said before, when you privatise public assets in a mixed economy, you remove the brakes on competition that occurs. There is no competition. You get 3 or 4 large corporations dominating the marketplace and setting prices, looking at what somebody else sets and setting the same price and maximising their profits at their customers' or shareholders' expenses. That's the way it is. The only people that matter in a capitalist economy are the major shareholders of corporations, and everything that is done by these corporations is not done for the public interest, it's not done for social reasons, it's not done for national interest, it's done to maximise profits for unaccountable major shareholders whose major responsibility is to create ever-increasing profits irrespective of the human, social and environmental costs. So we are now paying the price in this budget of believing 3 decades of neoliberal rhetoric. And this budget highlights the bankruptcy and the inability of neoliberalism to solve any human problem, let alone the problems we face as a community today. Nothing. And it affects everybody. Don't tell me I'm on a social security benefit, I don't have to worry. Look at the budget. 1.6 billion will be scraped off social security payments in the next 4 years. Look at the budget. Look at how the screw has been turned on people trying to get a disability support pension. Look at the budget and see how the screw has been turned on more and more people. Look at the healthcare budget. Where's the debate about healthcare? Look at the cuts that have been made as far as healthcare is concerned. Legal aid and every other important aspect. And it's been made because this government is not willing to look at the revenue side. It is not willing to tax its corporate mates. It's the kingmakers. It's a puppet government. A puppet government whose strings are being pulled by the boardrooms of unaccountable corporations who set the political, social and cultural agenda in this country on a daily basis. On a daily basis. As I said before, if you are interested in breaking that nexus, if you want to be involved in a political and social cultural organisation that whose primary aim is to put public interests before corporate interests, I encourage you to join as soon as possible. Look at it. Look at the website, pibci.net, pibci.net. Give us a call, leave a message, 0439 395 489, 0439 395 489. Write to us at Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. So, defence up, and the list goes on and on. So, this is, as I said before, it's a budget that's come out before the shit hits the fan. It's a bit dead cat bounce budget. We will see a temporary spike in economic activity as small businesses go out, those 1 million small businesses go out and buy some assets. A temporary spike. We'll see the Liberal National Party boys and girls looking at the opinion polls, doing their own internal polling, looking at the success of Mr Cameron, the Conservatives in the United Kingdom. Who knows for how long. And using the Murdoch media to push their neoliberal agenda. Do you really think if the Abbott-led government had a majority in both houses of Parliament, that the under-30s wouldn't be waiting 6 months for unemployment benefits? Do you really think that if the coalition had a majority in both houses of Parliament, that you wouldn't be paying a Medicare co-payment today? Do you really think that if the coalition had a majority in both houses of Parliament, that trade unions would have been legislated almost out of existence? If you think that, well, I feel sorry for you. Because what this budget is about, it's about creating a temporary economic climate, an economic dead cat bounce which will make people forget about the high cost of housing, about the high cost of childcare, about high increased, rapidly escalating healthcare costs for individuals as more and more practices stop bulk billing. And the list goes on and on. This is all that this budget is about. So what can you do? What can you do? Look, I can talk till the cows come home. I can talk till, the sacred cow falls on my head and squashes me. But I'm just one person. One person. You're one person. But you know 2 or 3 people. And they know 2 or 3 people. And they know 2 or 3 people. You may have access to a website. You may have access to a telephone. You may be on a Twitter stream. I think it's important that we puncture this balloon. It's on its way up. It needs to be punctured in the public imagination. If it's not punctured in the public imagination in the next few weeks, the grounds will be laid for a November election, which the Murdoch media will pull out all stops, as it did in the United Kingdom, to ensure that the neoliberal forces which currently rule us continue to rule us for another 3 years and possibly reintroduce that agenda which was squashed in 2014 because they didn't have a majority in both houses of Parliament. So it's important that you talk to people about the nature of this budget. You explain to people what it's all about. It has got nothing to do with restructuring the economy. It has nothing to do with looking after the interests of the 33% of people on small wages. It has nothing to do with looking after the future, not the short-term 2 to 3 month future, but the long-term future of small business in this country, which has been strangled by the unconscionable behaviour of multinational corporations and the fact that these multinational corporations pay voluntary taxation. Look at the childcare arrangements, parental leave arrangements. Look at the other aspects of the budget. See how they've been structured to give the people a sugar fix. And the great thing about a sugar fix is it lasts for a few hours, but then you need another one. But because there's no revenue coming in, there's no second sugar fix. So, thank you for listening to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network. This program has been streaming live on 3cr.org.au. The program is podcast. That's right, it's there for the next few weeks. You can access the podcast by going to 3cr.org.au. You can write to us at Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. You can email us at anarchistage@yahoo.com. anarchistage@yahoo.com. You can go to the website anarchistmedia.org. anarchistmedia.org. Please use any of the material you see on the website. Pretend it's yours. Send it to your friends. Please use any of the material on the podcast. Send the podcast around the world. I think it's important that people actually understand what this budget is all about. They're open for business. We're open for resistance. If you're interested in resistance, you can't donate money, you can't be active in many of the things that we organise over the year, you've got health issues, don't worry. You can always join PIBSIC, Public Interests Before Corporate Interests. Write to us at Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Call us on 0439 395 489. 0439 395 489. Email us at info@pibci.net. Go to the website. Computer literate? Use it. Download an application for PIBCI, pibci.net. Join PIBCI today and become part of a political and social movement that will bring this country to its knees. Thank you once again for listening to The Anarchist World this week on your local community radio station. Listen in to The Anarchist World this week, next week on your local community radio station. And remember, it's up to you to puncture the budget balloon. You don't get involved, nothing changes. Listen in next week to The Anarchist World this week.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World this week. Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to The Anarchist World this week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.